So anyway, so earlier I was talking to you about carriers, right? And I said I think it's more important that instead of like, let's say, revamp everything right away, that it might be nicer to first, let's say, balance squadrons number and plane number per squadron, and then make the differences in planes first and see how that plays out, right? Because if you start to see that, okay, the balance has gotten better, even though we haven't done the UI interface, then now we know if we add other carrier lines, we can differentiate the planes, keeping the plane squadron and numbers the same. So, thereby giving flexibility and playability to the carrier player, but making it so that like the player has to decide how do I want to use these planes for maximum effect, and then that creates a sort of a nation versus nation thing. Like I mentioned, sort of like let's make it Japanese where you can click, and that gets a bonus to dogfighting, while the Americans are better at strafing, right? So now you have a CV battle where, as an American CV player, I'd be like, I want to strafe your planes, and the Japanese player is doing everything he can to not get in a strafe, but to put it into a dogfight. He wants the dogfight more than the strafe, right? It's something like that. So I think that would be a better way to see where things go first before, let's say, oh, let's just revamp everything top to bottom because we don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
I know, Phil, you talked about you identified probably 3 or 4 major issues you felt with carriers.
Yeah.
So, show a good example, for example, with strafing. Strafing, you say, US planes are better at strafing, for example.
For example.
But actually strafing itself is kind of interface flaws. And so
it is.
if you focus on that, new players will have a very hard time learning it.
I agree.
That's why we would like maybe to approach from a different side.
Right.
I'm not saying that we'll rework the whole class, for example, in one update. Probably we'll determine where we want to go, and then maybe step by step.
I agree. And
that's also with our very fast development process. That's the advantage we have, right? Is that every 3 weeks we come with a patch.
It's a premium ship
doing that kind of stuff.
So I have an idea.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
When they're done.
To your point, though, someone said, like, can there be more differentiation in planes? Not like say like if the planes are the same squadron size and even the same firepower, make the differentiation. This one's planes are faster. This one has a faster acceleration. So if they're near each other and they turn, this one can catch him. But if they have a long distance, he'll outrun them. Because right now it feels like the only difference is the tier the planes are.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to get at. Is like let's have planes be the differentiating factor, and then let's skill play the rest of them, right? So that and if we can do that first, we might see potentially better balance before we have to say let's revamp everything as a whole. Now I agree, like things like strafe and things were implemented as a way to sort of like make adjustments to the way the UI is, and it's not an ideal scenario.
To be fair, right? I mean, I think what Phil said is very important, right? New players, we know, have a really hard time with carriers.
Yes.
It's really, really difficult to get into it. It's so different UI-wise. It's so different to play. You have to focus on completely different things. You have to know different things. You have to know everyone's AA, which you didn't care about for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like there's so many different things that we got to rework with that. That like doing one little piece, if we change that and then we change the rest of it, we have to change this piece all over again, right? Because like as you said, like with the strafe UI, if we make our UI not suck, then well, then why do we fix strafing? Because now we just have to redo that all again. So we don't want to do work over and over again.
That's
I think
true. Yeah.
Phil has a good point that like we're definitely not going to do this in one patch. Like we're definitely going to do this probably over maybe a patch or 2 or more. And that's like with all of our stuff, we want to do it incrementally. So we totally get like let's not do a crazy revamp, but we've got to do something. We know there are problems.
It has to be like I agree because carriers are very different than everything else, and it's not an easy thing for new players to play, right? I mean, like I put out guide videos, I know, and I know a lot of people still struggle with it even after I've done all the explanations. Like I've gone into look here, these are all the things step by step, and people still struggle with it. So I get it, right? Like, I mean,
Beyond that side, it's an open question. It's an open question for us too, because our designers are just gathering and discussing things right now. There's not right solution, immediate solution to this.
I have an idea that I think can help CV games play, at least on the higher tiers. Because one of the biggest issues is, you've got a couple of Kutuzovs on there. You've got Kutuzovs running around. You don't want to fly near them. So, pretend this is a Kutuzov. This is a battleship. Your squadron's flying over. It's going to get mowed apart by Kutuzov on the way there. But historically, airplanes wouldn't be flying that low. So why not increase the altitude so that they can fly over the Kutuzovs without getting hit? And then as they get towards their target, then they get lower.
That might be better though as an active ability, right? So
Are you talking about dealing with terrain?
No. Talking about like a plane
this is a ship.
fly outside of AA range.
Yeah.
I see.
Higher. So instead of flying lower where it's going to get destroyed, start it higher, and then when it gets closer to do its attack run, get it lower.
I get it.
And so over open water, you can fly over cruisers without having to worry about destroyed, and it forces them to be closer, so when it gets lower, that's when they get destroyed. That might help high tier gameplay.
So you mean
It's a new
another
level of
ring
gameplay,
point of no
actually.
return, that's where they start lowering altitude, so to speak?
Yeah, when they actually go
cool
further
if you
on.
had the ability, like it was a skill shot almost, where you're tapping it, you're going to be up in the air for 7 seconds or 5 seconds, and then that's when you're basically invulnerable to AA.
Yeah, or maybe even a level 4 or 5 captain skill, higher altitude or something. I don't know, just something like that to give a little more survivability outside of that range.
And another issue is air superiority combat, because currently we want more air superiority combat, but we realize that it's not very fun to play.
Yeah.
It may be useful for the team, it may be efficient, but it's not fun to play, and that's another problem.
It's not fun to play, and it's not fun to play against, right? I mean, the other day, I was in a Hakuryu, I ran into somebody in a random battle playing a 4-2-2 Hakuryu. The most cancerous non-game ever, like he didn't do anything, but he zoned me out the whole game, so I literally spent my entire game feeling like I was just flying on the outside of things, right? And so, I think what you're going towards. I think what you're going towards is, I think you want more CVS supporting role, kind of maybe more that direction.
Maybe Phil, you could talk about that of kind of the ideas that we want to push carriers and what the sort of thought behind them originally was. What is our intention with the carrier class?
Well, first thing, we couldn't imagine naval warfare of this era without carriers.
Yeah.
Probably it would be much better and easier to balance if there were no carriers. But that would be absurd. Then we had to make maybe a World War I game.
Yeah.
And we thought it was some kind of very battle influencing, very interesting class with the high vulnerability, but with the ability to deal damage and to have support over large distances.
Right.
And that was a nice idea, but then too many factors actually collide here.
Yeah.
For example, skill dependence. Then players always talk about creep, power creep on some ships. There's too many factors about this, and different loadouts and different nation balance. So this is the hardest thing in the game right now. And we are very far from the initial concept, I think.
Yeah, I think we are.
So let's move. I know we got to talk about carriers. Let's move on over here.
We've come a long way in the last year. In the last year, we've seen new lines of destroyers, new lines of cruisers, new lines of battleships. I guess what's next is a new line of CVs. You were ready to talk about that.
At this point, we need to sort these things out before we get new premium CVs, new researchable CVs. Because if we just throw more, we can do it, of course, but if we just throw more CV content in the current state, I think that won't be very good for the game. Because we need to fix the basement of the building and then to end some floors then.
Because otherwise you're going to have so many lines. You're going to have so many lines. And now it's like your fundamental problem hasn't been solved. You throw so much more there. Now it's a complete disaster. How do you start balancing and working on that? Because when you start to work, you have to rework.
It's just more of a, if we have more content to balance, it just makes it more and more difficult for us to do it, especially with premium ships.
Something that's pretty common with problem solving is that we tend to be pendulum. We tend to swing the pendulum too far the other way. What I find works well is if you try to simplify issues. I know that you're talking about a lot of issues, like bringing out the idea of different elevations of planes. This makes it more and more complex.
Yeah.
Perhaps what might work better is to simplify just a little bit. Because the more complex you make the carrier aspects, the more features, the more different approaches, the more complex you
And
make.
weird nuances,
The
right?
harder you make it to solve all of our problems.
Well, one of the things that makes the regular Warship game so good is it is very complex, but not on the surface. I can take somebody that's never played before, put them in, and they have fun. They don't understand how deep all the things are going, but they don't need to. They need to if they want to be like a purple stat player. But they can get to blue without even knowing about things like proper armor angle. If they're just basically approaching enemies,
But
they're doing it almost
not true
accidentally.
with carriers.
Well, yeah,
And that's the problem. It's almost like we need to figure out where to make that complexity. I mean, for example, strafing. strafing isn't a purple level stat, it's a necessity. Same thing with manual drops. If you don't do that, you might as well just not even play.
They say what makes a great player from just a good player is like supposed to be a small margin. With a carrier, it's sort of like you don't know what you're doing, you're purple.
That was what I was talking
nothing in
about,
between.
right?
There's no-
right.
The curve is very great on there.
Yes.
Right, and it's gotten even more extreme these days, right? Now you have, the only carrier players that exist are people like me, the super unicums, and the people who are potatoes. That's who you have.
You've made it to tier 10 auto drop.
So you get to a tier 10 battle,
There are people
and
out there.
you go to tier 10 battle, and your team is the unicum and the potato, and that doesn't work, right?
This is exactly
And
what.
in those rounds, a good carrier player will make or break the game.
Yeah.
Because
Two extreme values of player skill.
Yeah.
Two extreme values, and sometimes it's fun. Well, we had a player event in St. Petersburg like a couple of weeks ago, and we have Game Zone with press accounts. And some new players came there, just newcomers. They didn't know anything about the game, and I had one guy. He didn't play World of Warships, and he said, "I want to play tier 10 CV." Don't do that. This is very. I want to play it in PvP. Okay, you're the boss. And he actually dealt like 100,000 damage and won. So this is carriers are very extremely dependent on everything. You can perform absolutely perfectly,
I
or you
find
can
the
suck.
margin of error on carriers to be much smaller than any other class of ship. I don't have the best connection because I live in a rural area. When I try to drop and set up my planes, we know that there's that circle of death, we call it. That once the plane is inside that circle, you can no longer change the orders. Many times my plane is visually outside the circle. I give it different orders, and it says too late.
Yeah.
Because there's that differentiation between where my
Server and
computer
client.
thinks the planes are and where the server thinks they are. So we have a much narrower band of sensitivity than with Destroyer. If I shoot through torpedoes and it's a second earlier than it really is, or a second later, it's not that much of a margin of error. Whereas with the carrier, it's a much tighter margin of error. And I don't know that there's any way to deal with it.
But anyway, so like carriers, I think it's something that has to be looked at in depth. Really.
Yeah, let's talk about something about carriers because
Yes.
So,
carrier gathering.
We all know we don't carry a problem.
Destroyer HE. We'll bring that up. because
Can
we've been-
I put a request in?
Yeah, what's the
course.
For 4 CVs?
We're moving on from CVs. No
Can
more
we
CVs.
move them up? Can we start them at tier 5? Only because right now at tier 3 and 4,
There's not enough AA.
there's a ton of ships that don't have AA, and I'm not as good as you guys.
You think that's by accident?
No, my point is though, what fun is it? Every time I'm trying to get a new player and they end up in one, I'm trying to explain, just dodge. And like games are supposed to be a dynamic of you versus the other person. If the only dynamic is me going left, right, and if it ends up with just them versus a carrier, it's like, this is retarded. I don't even have a guy with a BB gun. Like, this is
How is that going to change if you move it from one tier to the next?
Well, I mean,
At least in tier 5, they'll never run into a ship that has no AA.
yeah, tier 5 they've got some.
Tier 5 needs to be fixed. Tier 5, just being up there with tier 7s, if you're tier 5 and you gotta face it, those are gonna be your beginning players right there. Getting tossed in the mix against Gneisenhaus, especially in cruisers, it's a recipe for disaster. I'd much rather see tier 5 be capped at 6, so they're
But the
only
problem
fighting
then
against.
is you have 6 that will constantly get matched against 8, right? That's the problem as well.
This brings up a good point. Why should wargaming choose the tier differentiation for us?
Because
many
you get
players,
potato divisions.
many players want to play against a variety of other tiers, and
Because
that's fine.
It hurts your team though. If you wind up with a
power
Harlan in a match, which I went up against,
You're right, absolutely. That's why we don't have 3-tier differentiation. But why not give the player the choice of 1-tier differentiation, 2-tier differentiation, or no tier differentiation?
and give
when the game is busy, when the game is busy,
That already is that,
low tier.
right? That already exists, right? So when you
when you destroy a higher tier
when you
ship.
fire at a high, so the idea is that
Yeah.
if we have the same exact balance each time, it's not as interesting, right? Because it's sometimes fun to be the big dog. It's also sometimes fun to be the underdog.
Right.
And so you want to balance that stuff. If you want a perfectly balanced game, we have PvE. You make the exact same balanced teams every single time. There's
Why
no
not
tier
give the
difference.
player that choice?
You can play PvE.
No, I'm not talking about PvP. I'm talking about PvP.
So I think then you run into queue times and everything else. And
But give us the
You should
choice.
see another side of the story, for example, because maybe working on Omaha on tier 7 is not very good, but when you actually grind up to Lazy now and you see Omaha, you're very satisfied. So there's two kind of stories here.
yeah, it's always a flip side to it.
I mean,
In a tier 4 Japanese destroyer, I'll take on a tier 6.
I played the Isokaze in a tier 8 round.
you know what?
But on the other hand,
That should be the next community contributor battle. You and the Isokaze versus tier 8s. And see what happens.
Not in the contributor.
but you understand what I'm saying about give the player the choice. Because that's a coding issue.
It's a good concept, yeah.
That
But
we can, when the player base is not there, then we say, okay, give us the 2-tier differentiation because we can't get in a match in less than 10 minutes. I don't want that. Today is Saturday. There are 15,000 people playing. Let me just play with tiers on my own level. And this way we give the player the choice. You do the coding one time, and this
But so, I mean, I'm a hardcore player, right? Why would I not just always play the exact same tier? If I wanted the best advantage to play every single game, like if I'm just being selfish, right?
Yeah.
Then like why would I not just do that?
it's
And then-
Because it's a 10-minute queue.
well, exactly. That just
Well,
sucks.
because
Then the
you want the
experience sucks.
additional
We don't make a shitty.
experience.
Why would we? Why would we enable?
We just finally got away from that.
They don't like experience. They have
Why, we don't want to give players shitty experiences though, or the option to have shitty experiences.
No, people want to get into a game instantly.
I mean, look, if you want to
I
talk
get
about
that, right? But the solution is not make another shitty experience.
Yeah.
It's to solve the problem at its core, which is that the tiers are. We've stopped tier 4s from playing with tier 5s, so we have this nice safe area, and so now they're always out tiered. It's not that the problem is that sometimes you're low and sometimes you're high. It's that when you're 5, you're always low. That's the core issue,
Yeah,
right?
that's-
Because we want the variety.
Clearly, we
Variety
have
is
a
good.
difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And that's the best
people on
reason
our
to give
planet
the player the
XPing out
choice.
of
Because it doesn't cost anything.
It does cost
No
that
price.
time.
it does cost really.
It does cost money.
We have to admit that much part of our game is tier progression. So if we remove some reasons to progress, so why these high tier ships are made for them?
Well, and to play devil's advocate,
Why play them at all if you
Yeah.
can just come from the seat of tier 5
Right,
and play
so
tier
I'll play
5?
my
Well, and
Minikaze with
not
0
only
matchmaker
that-
every time, and I'll win every single battle.
play
Like,
devil's advocate, having a tier 5 player go up against 7s, it teaches people to be better players. So that's a good aspect.
It does.
It's causing people to actually
and the motivation to beat it.
I think
Man,
that
that's a
should be-
sweet ship.
Yeah, I think there should be some kind of this queue breaker when you. So maybe matchmaker options are fine, but you have to break the queue when you're always up tiered. This is the issue, I think.
Yeah.
See, I'm just flipping it. I also miss being able to take a 4 into a 6. You know, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Because I keep every single ship, and I used to play every single ship. It doesn't feel fair jumping into a 4 now because it's always 4-3, and against people that have like 50 games.
Yeah.
At least if it was a 4, 5, 6, I didn't feel like a seal clubber because
Maybe
at
I
least
need
they
to
were
start
above me.
playing 4s.
Best example now is-
Isokaze, for example.
No, not even in a Sakaze. Like, jump into a Phoenix. It used to be you got a Phoenix and you're up against people in tier 6s. You have to work. Now
there's very little. Now you don't.
You know, with the ARP ships, you know, it's mainly been just, you know, X amount of damage, X amount of X. Going forward, do you plan to, like, I guess focus more on more PvE, like the high school fleet stuff coming out next year, or do you continue to go with the, I guess, the XP stuff, damage?
The question was, Arpeggio, they normally earn stuff through experience and damage. Is that the same idea for high
So you
school
think
fleet in the
it's more
future?
like mission-based to win a ship as opposed to X amount of XP, that type of thing? Okay.
Have you played test server the stuff?
Oh, no, I haven't done the
I think they've done some campaign stuff. So, you know,
There's some new campaigns that have multiple missions per level.
I cannot tell you about high skill fleet, but we probably know that Arpeggio is ending now.
Yes.
Fortunately, and I don't know whether we will actually get a new license, but we're making campaigns now, and this is known information. Campaigns will be like.
There will be some more variation. Anyways, don't want to linger, but don't want to linger. No. But
When do you have to leave?
Just
Technically, what's your time?
Well, no, because it's, you know what, I mean, these are core gameplay issues, right? And it's become like I see it in my comment section. I see people where they've gone in the past where they really love the game, and over time I'm starting to see the comments become more and more angry, more and more frustrated with the game, mechanics, right? And and for me, as somebody who sees it on a daily basis, it's not a positive experience because I have to read.
You also have to remember you're talking to the very hardcore players who are also very angry and very commenting. You have to realize it's a subsection, right? So like you look at the data of like how well our players retain in our game. Like we've improved that over time. We've made it better for our players to stay in and stay excited. So it's
denying that. I'm not denying
I
that.
haven't been chat banned for 2 weeks.
I'm not denying that.
Congratulations.
I'm not denying that.
Good job, Sarah.
But I think it would be a little bit misguided to deny that they're not frustrating mechanics in the game and to say
look, our game is definitely not finished. We're definitely not saying that like we're already talking about how carries our problems, how balance between nations is hard for us. There's many things here.
No free-to-play game can be finished ever.
Exactly.
Always
Keep in mind that your gameplay is also dynamic. Your connection to the wargaming servers is not the same moment to moment. It's dynamic and it changes over time.
Well, see, and this is the beauty about the free-to-play method of the game. Warships is going to be around for a decade. You got a game like Battlefield 1 or Titanfall or Call of Duty. That game comes out, they only have X amount of time to improve the game before people move on. But that's not the case here. You can tweak year after year.
One of the things, like when I joined the company, I was like, I don't really like free to play. Like I don't like the concept of it in my mind, but I've kind of come around to it where it's like, if you look at it from this perspective, that we have to keep our players happy. We have to listen to every one of you guys, or you stop paying us.
Exactly.
And that way it's kind of cool because, like you said, like Battlefield 1, you pay the $60 or $100, and they don't really care anymore. They're basically sold you what they want.
They just have to make small tweaks every now and then to keep players coming back for the DLC, but after 2 years, it's run its course.
Yeah, they're going to dump it. And that's actually the kind of cool thing about free-to-play games is that they are forced to listen to their community so much more and to like really listen to you guys and say like, okay, if we piss you off for a week, that sucks for us because a lot of guys are just going to go, you know what, after this point, like I'm done. This pisses me off. Yeah.
So you have to be careful about doing it.
That's never been a small business success model.
What's that?
Do you see, like, if you see a change and they see anger, how quick do you actually notice, like, monetization drops? Like,
Have you monitor issues?
Well, we can't really talk about monetization in general.
How quick do you see the response like that? Is it like, is there like a delay from when you see sales drop?
I mean, I think like in terms of just like player participation, we can look at like CCU on the server, number of battles, average battles played, all that kind of stuff, and we can see very quickly after a patch whether things were going well or things are going bad. I mean, like that's in like hours. We can see the trends. Like, did we do the right thing? Did we not do the right thing? And one of the things we're also trying to implement right now is a survey system that's much more integrated to the system, where we can say, like, man, I had a terrible experience. That game sucked. You can click on that right now, and we can have a live thing where we say, like, look, all of a sudden everyone's starting to get pissed. Like, what did we do wrong? All of a sudden there's people who are not having fun, and they're saying negative things. So what we can react on a minute-to-minute basis, not even like a couple hours. So that's our goal in the future, is to be that much faster reacting to that kind of stuff. In terms of season pass,
what's your
cool
take?
idea right now.
What's your take on the state of tier 7, 8, 9 US cruisers?
Tier 7, 9. What?
7, 8, and 9 US cruisers.
More charges are not
What's your take?
Okay, I think we have two really issues: is Pensacola and Baltimore. New Orleans, well, it's tricky. We try to improve it gradually.
Things that really amazing.
You tend to improve the ships right after I get through grinding.
So Pensacola and Baltimore, you're concerned.
Yeah, Pensacola and probably Pensacola and Baltimore are concerns.
I mean, that's
This can be fixed probably in different ways.
They want to spend it. They want cool things. So
have you guys ever thought about making it so that the current iteration of Defensive
have free time,
is
they have a family,
uniquely to US
they can
cruisers?
allocate their funds
Right?
correctly, and
So the
make themselves go
ability
broke
to
overnight.
disrupt the spread is
hopefully,
a uniquely USN
We're
cruiser
gonna
thing.
divorce.
I don't think we consider that, but maybe it's a good thing to consider.
Because, again, I'm looking at it right now and I'm saying, like, in competitive,
And when you click
nobody
it
will
out,
bring a US cruiser.
Because Japanese has high explosive shells, Russians have raiders,
exactly. So
and
everybody
railguns.
just
Yeah, I see.
So I want to see where, anybody who's ground online can say, I can go into rank and be competitive, and not, I am completely worthless at ranked because somebody else can do my job better.
Absolutely right. It's not just.
So
We should have passed this idea. the developers.
So I mean, especially with U.S. cruisers, people will say, "Well, look, we have gun arcs that are not as good. We have a radar that's not as good. Our HE isn't as good. Like, what can we have? Well, I mean, their strength is supposed to be 8, so why not give that to them? And then what happens is every other nation's cruiser maybe give them a defensive fire variant that maybe buffs attack power by a certain amount, but no strength.
I see.
So you can say now, the U.S. has something completely unique. Now, if you run into a carrier range, you better bring a U.S. cruiser, otherwise you're going to be eating, actually nicely spread out torpedoes instead of...
Competitive meta is very interesting. We have to monitor it because when we're talking about competitive meta, players always tend to choose the most efficient ship.
Yes, exactly.
And that's very, demonstrative.
Yeah. I mean, again, like...
Yeah, I think it's probably about your time to get out of here, right?
Okay, can I say one last thing?
As long as it's not about carriers.
No, not about carriers, not about AA, not about carriers, not about AA, actually about high explosive. Because I actually talked to you about this earlier, right? But I might as well tell Phil. So, right now, my issue with HE, no skill. You click, you aim, shells land, fire start, damage gets done. It's too... It's easy, right? Like you want to play AP, it's like you got to think about angles and surprising people at the broadside and whatnot. HE is just click, spam, and I will get damage. Like,
I think
AP are more rewarding if you play it right.
Exactly.
I think you had a really cool suggestion for how to adjust fire damage
exactly.
over time.
So what I was thinking is that how right now we have a damage saturation mechanic, right? Where after a certain amount of damage gets done, the area becomes damage saturated.
Yep.
What I was thinking is that earlier, like we have like a sort of decreasing curve of damage that can be done to a damage saturated area with fire. So at the end, it'll be very, very little. So it's like if you hit a middle section that's damage saturated already, you're not going to be getting as much. And as that area continues to get pounded, you should be getting less and less and less and less fire damage when fires do come up. So that's forcing destroyers or cruisers down that when they're shooting, you have to pick a new section. You got to now aim for bow. You got to aim for
cool idea.
You got to aim for something.
I have a problem with
right?
damage saturation. If I pepper the hell out of a cruiser in the middle, it breaks in half. It doesn't go on shooting at me.
Yeah, it's not exactly historically accurate.
Not historical accuracy. And, I can sort of see why you guys did it. I can sort of see that. But I mean, again, like you want to make it so that like the person who's using HE now has to think, what section do you want to hit? How do you want to hit it? Do you want to go for bow? Do you want to go? And of course, when you are aiming at a ship, that changes dramatically how you aim. Like if I have a battleship coming on at me, bow on, to hit the stern, I've got to aim differently at a different position than if I'm hitting a bow or the middle.
It adds a cool nuance.
And
I think that the concern though is that like we want newer players to be able to use HE and understand it on a very quick, easy level. I'm talking about simplifying mechanics, right? Like making things more complicated doesn't usually solve problems. It only makes more usually.
Yeah.
So we want to keep things as simple as possible. And so maybe there's something to be doing there.
There should be a clear difference between these two types of shells.
Right.
Yeah.
Different level of rewarding, different level of skill.
But
Exactly.
HE is too rewarding. It's too much. It's like if I play a cruiser, like I play Japanese cruiser.
If you play Zao,
Yeah, he plays out. Yes.
I play
got 20% fire.
I think there are issues with some ships, but overall the concept is good.
Yeah.
Maybe some ships are too.
I think some ships benefit too much from HE. I think it benefits too much.
Probably.
I would like to see that. Like I would like to see maybe a tutorial mission to explain a little bit of HE. Just let's
Definitely better
teach
tutorials.
players what
Definitely.
HE
You have to leave soon?
Yeah, this guy's
Slightly sideways sort of comment now. Captain skills, more customization there would be very nice. Like
More options, more builds.
And you've seen the new
More diversity.
It's speculation. The thing that got really. It's speculation. I get it, but I like the idea
No,
there.
but it's an
which
effort.
is, I sort of talked about. I like the idea. I like the idea where you're now you have this many captain skill points. Now you got to choose. Do you want better offense? Do you want better defense? Do you want better utility? Do you want better support? Again, borrowing League of Legends a little bit.
Well, so we borrow from say World of Warcraft, right? So it's like you have three specific kind of trees, which are it's an offensive tree, a defensive tree, and a utility tree.
Right.
Definitely for our crew skills, we want to change that up. So it's very much more like, well, how do I want to spec out my ship? There should be more choices. Right now there really is one or two options.
Everyone knows about the league.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, I think that
These guys
direction
are
would
all
be nice.
too hardcore to
I
not
think that
know.
direction would be really, really nice.
I resemble that
to finally
remark.
choose something you kind of have that ability to say, oh, you know what, I want to go and become a bit tankier as a battleship, so I'll pick a little bit more here, or I'll pick a little bit more there, right? And think about something like that. Also, the one skill in particular, actually two skills in particular, survivability expert plus 400 HP per tier. Great for destroyers. Doesn't really make much sense on battleships or cruisers.
For cruisers too, actually, because it adds hit points in different hit locations, and for cruisers it's not like this amount. It actually brings more because cruisers has heal.
Okay.
It's not that simple.
But it's also not clear.
And that's the
Yeah,
problem.
it's also not clear.
It's not. Yeah, that's the
Because everybody
problem.
sees
That's
only
the
like,
problem.
here's a 4,000 HP increase at tier 10. You know, why would I get that on the demo expert?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that doesn't seem to be very clear.
I see.
And it's a big issue, right? And of course, the other one is, of course, the very deceptive fire prevention skill, or firefighting skill, like minus 7% fire chance
Chance
of fire. And
for
it's
the hull, not for the shell. That's the
yeah,
problem.
it's like, you know, and of course, like,
After all, multiplications is a very small
yeah, it's
amount.
very small, and then we can't see what the whole
We are going to
lot-
fix this skill
Yeah.
in the captain skill rework.
Yeah, so-
it will be probably more value.
Okay.
And it will have additional effect.
Good, that's good. That's good.
Did you come up with a question?
The last one.
Last one? No? All right, well, I think I know Phil's
Get outta
looking
here.
at it, guys.
Thank you very much.
I actually have one quick, like,